What is going on, everybody? This is Coach Coleman, Jesse Coleman, and thanks for checking into another episode of Breakthrough Blueprint, the podcast, where we help you tap into your full potential. What is going on, what it is, what it do. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Man, a lot has happened, since we tapped in. I don't even know where to start. Well, first start, shout out to the Chicago Bears. We didn't get it done, and I would say the future looks so bright for us, man. At least we beat Green Bay. That was the big thing. We beat them. Like they can talk all they want up there in Wisconsin. We beat them to move on to the next round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, we came up a little bit short against Los Angeles Rams, and some of my LA people was definitely talking a lot of crap, but it's all good. Shout out to a good season. Definitely excited about the future though. Like we finally have a coach. And not only do we have a coach, we have a quarterback. And take it from somebody who has been very critical of Caleb. You all know I'm very big in college football. So I know a lot of how things was going with him in college. And I would say, man, he's growing into a leader. Like he is, yeah, he's showing up how he should. I'm looking forward to seeing the future with that. What else happened in sports? Indiana, listen, Indiana, first 16-0 team to win the national championship in football. That whole story is life lesson, is business lessons. They keep talking about it. Yes, they could turn that into an actual movie because the way how they turned their program around in 2 years, no five stars, hitting the transfer portal, players that has been looked over, that just got the right leadership, the right culture, the right environment, and they put it together to go 16-0 and win the national championship. That yeah, you can get a lot of life lessons about that, and it goes into a kind of like what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited about that, and yeah, as you can see for the people on YouTube, as you can see, this is probably the first episode ever. I do not have my hat on as I usually do, but Chicago, the weather's cold, so I got on a skull cap. I took the skull cap off. I was getting hot. It is what it is, and yeah, today's topic, I want to go into something. I was just at Glover U's Jeff Glover's Glover U Live Unreal Summit in Arizona, which I'll say being in places where the weather is nice than when you are at home. At home is right now, I think it was like 11 degrees or something like that. In Arizona, we had mid 70s, sometimes low 70s, and yet it was amazing. The things that stuff like that would do for your mood and mindset when at home it's snowing and it's almost negative, but you're here in this place where it's sunny. So that was a good thing. But we was at the Glover U summit, the Live Unreal summit, and there was a lot of dope things that was shared. Jesse Cole was there. He is the owner, creator of Banana Ball with the Savannah Bananas, who has been taking over a lot of great things from that. But one thing that stuck out, one quote that really hit me hard when I heard it, and it was like, "Your circumstances do not get to determine your standards." Again, your circumstances do not get to determine your standards. And that quote there hit me like, damn, that's real. How many times have we used our circumstances, we use our upbringing, we use a lot of things to dictate or as an excuse to why we're not upholding our standards or why we're not operating in a certain way we should operate, right? And the truth of the matter really is that life doesn't get to lower your standards. You know, it just doesn't. Life doesn't get to lower your standards just because it gets uncomfortable. We know life is going to life, and our circumstances cannot be the reason to why our standards aren't in alignment to where they should be, right? And here's the definition, well, not definition, but here's the difference between your circumstances and your standards, right? Your circumstances, this is temporary, external, unpredictable. Like these are things that is external matters that you cannot control, right? Yes, if there were things, even if there are things you can control, the only way you can control it is your standards, and your standards is eternal, intentional, and is non-negotiable. We already know when we talk about making sure our standards aren't in alignment with our goal. Our standards are those non-negotiable things. Like these are things we cannot negotiate about. And when our circumstances get a little iffy, when shit hits the ceiling, things get a little bit bad, our standards have to be the things that we lean on and that we rely on. And again, that quote hit me hard. Like your standards do not, circumstances do not get to determine your standards. Hit me hard because I've fallen victim to this. We've all fallen victim to this, to where we use our circumstances as a crutch to why we are not performing the way we should perform, or we're not showing up the way we should show up. And there's a lot of different reasons why people let their circumstances dictate how they show up. One big reason is just the excuse. One thing for us as human beings is we will make an excuse for everything. We don't have accountability. We don't hold ourselves to a certain standard, even if we hold other people to that standard. We don't hold ourselves to that. And we got to stop letting our circumstances dictate how we show up. Because again, the things we can control is how we show up. Some of the circumstances we can't personally control, yet we can control how we show up to counteract what those circumstances is. And then our standards are things that keep us grounded when shit get chaotic. It's those contingency plans. It's that fail switch where it's that in case of emergency, hit this. So like, or you have your drill of take flying. We always talk about the flight attendant, where even though majority of the people don't read it, but they have the instructions in case of emergency, the pamphlet in the back of the seat rest, to where these are your standards. This is what keeps you calm and grounded in case of emergency, in case things get chaotic. And we have to remember that our standards is what we fall back on. It's always going back to the basics. Like I talked about my old boxing coach, shout out Coach Rick, that said your foundation, the basics, the fundamentals is what you fall back on when things get bad in the ring. So what that mean is you in round 6 or 7 and you're tired as hell. Your standards and your non-negotiables is to keep your damn hands up. It don't matter what happened. You may not be able to throw a punch. You keep your hands up and you keep moving. That is the standards. That is the non-negotiable. That's how we stay grounded when things get chaotic. We have a bad round where our opponent is unloading on us. We keep our hands up. We keep moving. That way, we can make it to the bell, to where at least we have 30 seconds to try to get things back together before the next round. Right. Here are some instances to where people actually lower their standards when things like this, and these are some things I'm gonna share because in my life, this is where I realized too, when you do a life audit and you do a self audit, and I look back at past experience, that I could see that my standards did get lower when some of these situations did happen, right? The first one, the main one that I think really hits a lot of people is when money get tight. When money get tight, we lower our standards, we get off track, we don't stick to the script. And you see that a lot. Another part is when we feel like it's too much work to do, that it's not enough time. Time is limited. We're running our back is against the wall. We start cutting corners to try to make up time. Another big part is when stress shows up. And as we know, stress is a silent killer. Stress It's one of those things that if we need to find something to do to be able to limit how much stress that we have in our life, right? When motivation disappears, we already know motivation is BS. Discipline, our standards, those are not BS. Motivation disappears. I just talked about how I was at this amazing event, this amazing education thing where everybody was motivated. But how many people is going to create those standards, create their discipline from that motivation they had last week to keep the ball rolling through 2026? So when motivation goes, standards usually fall too. That's why we have to uphold high standards. And then when we get into that season in life where we say life isn't fair, I've caught myself, and this is being very transparent and honest with you all. I have caught myself not too long ago feeling like, damn, life isn't fair. Like, what the fuck? Like, things are just, why are these things happening to me? I caught myself doing that. And that's why I'm one of those people like, I am not perfect. I am not this and that. Like, I still go through these things. It's one of the things you have to catch, right? When we fall into that life isn't fair phase, we start to lower our standards, right? And here's the thing: hard seasons do not require lower standards. They actually require strong ones. When things get hard, when things get rough, that is actually when our standards need to be really on point with things. Okay? We really have to have our standards on point because when things get tough, again, we fall back to our foundation, our fundamentals. Again, go back to the boxing thing. Hey, you get tired, you get rocked, you keep your hands up. That is your standards. Don't lower them. You stay there. And let's shift over a little bit and we can talk about our standards and we can talk about standards in business and in life. On the pod, we talk about a lot of things. And one of the big things that was said at the conference, and you hear from our people that's in the KW ecosystem, Gary Keller always says it a lot, is that you don't stop prospecting because the market shifts. Actually, that's when you double down. That's when you actually put the pedal to the metal and take it to another level when that market shifts. Because we know when the market shifts and the people that are showing up the way they're supposed to show up in those markets, they create market share. Once you get market share, you don't give that back. Okay. Other part is you don't stop leading because it gets uncomfortable. Upholding your standards when things get rough and you are a leader is what saves you majority of the time. You don't stop leading. That's when you need to lead more because not only you, the people that's in your organization, the people that looks up to you, the people that's dependent on you, they need it the most. They need the leader to show up when things get uncomfortable because they need to look for you as that confidence. They need to look to you and say for you to be like, "Hey, this is what's going on. We're going to keep working. Like things are going to work out." Here's one that I really love. You do not abandon discipline because things slow down. Again, let me say that again because I think a lot of people need to hear this. You do not abandon discipline because results slow down. Now, you may need to alter, you may need to adjust. That's why we track our numbers. That's why we track these things so we can make adjustments where we need to make adjustments with. But you do not abandon your discipline. Your discipline is what saves you when things start getting rough. Okay. Last part of that I want to share, and it's winners raise standards when circumstances get harder. It's like when when money is getting tight, we play red light, green light with our money. We have higher standards about the things that we invest in. When you have a budget for your business, when you have a budget for your company, we have a personal budget. Everybody should have that. Is that When things get a little bit harder, you raise the standards for those things. So, for instance, the market's getting a little bit tighter. The circumstances saying that the market is tighter. Okay, we're gonna raise our standards on our budget and what we're spending money on. We're gonna raise our standards on what we're spending our time and energy on because circumstances have gotten a little bit harder. So again, renters raise their standards when circumstances get harder. We got to remember that. We got to keep our standards have to be there, and if we have to raise our standards, we have to do that. And we talked about business, but as you all know, I am very big on personal life and talking about personal things as well. So next we let's go into the personal side of things, right? So the standards for your personal life. The biggest one is your health. Your health is should be your number one priority because listen, your health isn't optional when things get, when life gets busy. You have to stay on top. Your standards for your health, it should not matter what your circumstances is. That is one of the most important things you need to focus on. Your integrity, the way you show up, your values, those things are not they don't get to you don't get flexible when things are under pressure for those. Your standards, your values, those are the things you uphold. You don't let those things buckle. You don't think those things fold under pressure. You still stay in alignment with those things. Your self-respect doesn't retire when you get tired, right? It doesn't disappear. It doesn't go away. Your self-respect, the way you show up, that does not disappear anywhere. It doesn't retire. It doesn't go away because you're tired. You still show up looking your part, being the part, and showing up as the best version of yourself. And everybody talk about the highlight reels. Everybody share when things are going great, when things are beautiful and the flowers are blooming, the sun is shining. Yet the real test of your standards is how you show up on your worst days. We always talk about yes, you can learn a lot from winning, yet sometimes when you lose, that's when you really have to test your standards. How are you going to bounce back? How are you going to show up after that loss? How are you gonna bounce back? How are you gonna show up after that mistake or after, something happens that gets you in a place where like, damn, things are a little bit rough. How are you gonna show up? That's gonna be the real test of your standards. That's why we say our standards have to be our non-negotiables that keep us grounded when things go wrong. Okay. How are you gonna show up on your worst days? One of the biggest lies too, we talk about our circumstances do not get to determine our standards. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is, I'll get back to it later. That is a big thing. People are so willing and they try to justify lowering their standards temporarily. But the problem is when we lower it temporarily, we never raise them again. That's why when we talk about the gym and we say, hey, okay, you miss a day, don't let one day turn into 2 days or 3 days. Because once you lower that standard of showing up to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, it's going to be hard to raise it again. And then you're going to accept those lower standards. Like, okay, well, I'll just get to it when I can. And that's why later quietly becomes our new norm. Like that becomes the new thing. I'll do it later. You know what? I missed the gym today. I'll go tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll show up. Well, it's okay if I can miss 2 days. Next thing you know, your new standards is you probably go to the gym once or twice a week. We cannot let later become our new norm. And I'm talking to myself if I'm talking to y'all, especially on the business side of things. Okay, I'll do that later. I'll get to that. I'm at the office and I'll say, I'm just ready to go. You know what? I'll handle that when I get home. Like, we cannot fall into that trap. We take care of what we need to take care of. We do what we need to do when we need to do it. We can't use that line, I'll get to it later. Remember this. We always gotta remember this, right? The discipline over emotion, standards over excuses. We have to have discipline over emotions. Remember, we always talk about a lot on the pod, right? Being logical instead of emotional. We have to keep our discipline over top of our emotion and our standards over our excuses. We cannot let ourselves off the hook for our standards. Now, real estate and the real estate business owners, entrepreneurs, y- we're probably having a little, some hard seasons going on, right? Not just in entrepreneurship, but just in life in general. And this is the time where we have to raise your standards. Things are hard, things are rough. We have to raise our standards. You have to decide your non negotiables before life tests you. That's going to be the big thing. Do a life audit. Decide what your non negotiables is. You need to have that together because when life tests you, when we know life will test us, we already have to be a front of the eight ball. We can't have to be figuring out what to do when we're already being tested. Build your structure so your standards don't rely on motivation. We do not want our standards to rely on motivation because we know motivation comes and goes so quick. So we have to make sure we build structure. The structure is our non-negotiables. Our non-negotiables is our standards. Our standards is what we stand on, the business we stand on to keep us in alignment to what we want to do, and we don't fall into the trap of having motivation. And we have to. Here's the thing. Here's the key part that some people probably miss or they don't highlight is that we have to anchor our standards into identity. It has to be anchored into an identity and not into feelings because feelings come and go, feelings fade. But if we lock it into who we are, our identity as a person, we can be able to keep that going and we don't get caught into that trap. So as I get ready to wrap up, and every episode I do, I leave you all with a challenge, right? And I'm going to leave you all with two challenges today, like I always do. The first one is I want you to ask yourself, where have my circumstances been running the show? Where in my life has my circumstances been running the show? Where where have I been letting my environment, my past, my whatever the case may be, whatever circumstances that you've been using to let slow you down, where has that been showing up in your life? And then the second challenge is to ask yourself, what standards have you let slip away? What standards have I allowed to slip away? What standards that I have that I am not upholding? What standards that I had set in place that I am not showing up for? I want you to identify those things. And when you identify those things, now I want you to just identify it and then I say, okay, I am going to reset one standard immediately. So if you have multiple standards that you let slip away, I want you to identify one. Speed to it, get it to it right away. I'm going to identify one of those standards and I'm going to do a reset immediately, ASAP. All right. So, again, we do not let our circumstances determine our standards. We do not let that dictate our standards. We know our standards are non negotiable. Our standards is what we stand on, the foundation for us to stay on top of what we're doing and do what we do at a high level. We got to stay on top of those things. All right. So, this is your boy, Coach Coleman, Jesse Coleman. Thanks for checking into another episode of Breakthrough Blueprint, the podcast where we help you tap into your full potential. And I'm going to say it again because it hit me so hard, right? Your circumstances do not get to determine your standards. Your circumstances do not get to determine your standards. Your circumstances do not get to determine your standards. It's your boy, Coach Coleman, checking in. Talk to you later. Peace.